Hello, welcome to Olympia Pop Rocks, your only source for entertainment and knowledge of Washington's capital. We have a very special episode today in which our guest, Meg Martin, talks about her work opening a homeless shelter in downtown Olympia. But first, me and Guire, who is my best man, talk about our impression of downtown Olympia.
So, I have a confession to make.
Tell me, Guire, tell me.
I'm afraid to walk the streets of downtown Olympia. I've never been so frightened in my life. Now, granted, I've lived in Oakland, California. I've lived in Moscow. They scare me less than walking down 4th Avenue, Olympia.
Yeah. As soon as it gets dark, it's a rough place. It's a rough place.
Just the other day, somebody asked me for some spare change. I was walking by some other people.
Cops? Oh my God.
I walked by some other people. They said some stuff to me that I didn't understand. It just instantly, I went on red alert. I skipped right past yellow and orange. So I want to talk about Olympia's downtown.
Downtown Olympia.
Downtown Olympia. For all those people who don't know my wry humor, that's all a joke. I'm not frightened at all in the least to walk downtown Olympia.
But there are people who view downtown as a very unsafe place, unsavory, and they avoid it.
Yeah, no, yes. That is, I'm reflecting something that I've heard.
Yes.
You know,
from the straits of the world.
Definitely.
Yes.
Recently, you played at an event, and maybe you can talk more about that event because I'll get the name wrong and all this stuff.
All right. Well, our guest for this episode, Meg, she is part of a group that houses the homeless and transient people, and she was having a dinner in the at the Artesian Well. Is that what they got?
Artesian Well.
Yeah. And the idea was that people would sit down for a fancy meal in a heated tent, and then whenever you purchased a meal, it also would go for someone who is living on the street to also get a meal. And the idea is they all sit together and manja together, and they learn that they're not too different.
The mixing of the classes.
Yeah, exactly right. I was part of the entertainment. I played classical guitar for that, and yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. It was, and the staff that Meg was involved with was just very good at handling what must be their normal operations and dealing with people who are struggling with drug addiction, long-term homelessness, and or mental problems, maybe all of them. And they handled them so well and like very humanly, as well as I don't know how to phrase it, but they were very clear-eyed about the situations that there was. I was just not like, oh, they're getting had here, or this is unsafe, or they're enabling bad behavior. It wasn't like that at all. No.
Huh.
Yeah.
Cool. And then did people like your guitar playing?
Yes, they did. I would say one thing about one of the pleasant things about people who have mental problems is that they're very open with their opinions. And so, like, no one was like, it's like, you suck, what about? It's like, they were like, oh, that's good. Yeah. Like, very enthusiastic approval from a few people.
Did anybody call you played the theme song to DuckTales? Did anyone call that out?
Yes, I actually got the only reaction that I really needed for it was that someone went, ooh, at the right time, but they didn't acknowledge me or look at me like they were just doing it in the middle of a conversation. They stopped the conversation to do that, and I was just like, this has been a successful set. Very good.
That is something that happened in downtown Olympia.
Yes, it was a downtown event right in the heart of the beast in the Well, where all the humbums hang out.
Yeah, right now there's some controversy about actually closing that park down.
Oh, yeah, or putting up a fence.
Yeah, you need to put up a fence to keep people out of the well. But I think the reason why it was purchased by the city in the first place was to make sure that it was kept open for everybody to use. So it's kind of ironic that now they want to put a fence at night, I assume, and then open it during the day. Who knows?
I don't know.
That's crazy.
You know, I used to be young, and I was not a troublemaker by any means, but I certainly did not have any respect for a fence. Like, I could and would jump a fence to dumpster bread when I was in my 20s. Like, that was not a big deal at all. And I imagine if I were, wanting to get in there and I felt put out, I would, like, jump it on purpose at night and just hang out there because, fuck you. And I'm a very nice guy, and that, to me, sounds reasonable. So the fact that people are not going to jump that fence and, like, party in there, like, that's absurd.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what they do. I hope they don't put a fence up. But give me your impressions of downtown. What do you got? What do you think?
I've been thinking about it because we talked about we would discuss this for this episode, and I realized that the main problem, the conflict that is happening, is that there is people downtown who are rude to strangers, and that is something that I'm comfortable with. Like, I don't mind if people are rude to me, especially if they're a stranger. Like, that to me is like, like I am bulletproof, and there's like, oh no, some crazy person says they don't like me and that they're gonna kill me someday in my sleep. I was like, okay, Well, maybe that would be upsetting, but it's not even that.
Yeah, but nobody is threatening your life downtown.
Yeah, they're
They're
just
being like, nice hat.
yeah, they're like commenting on way people look, or like, well, a friend of mine went to go get water from the artesian well, and some people were like, "Hey, what are you doing there?" And it's like, "Oh, I'm just getting water from the well." And he's like, "You can't. That's our well." And she's like savvy enough to be as like, to do the jerk off hand motion and like get water. And but she said it's like, but what if her mom
touche jerk off hand motion.
It's like point and score. But she laid the point like her mom would have been as scared to go. Like if someone said it like that's our well, you can't get any from her. Like she'd be like, oh, and run away.
Yeah, but that person, probably wouldn't have said that to a mom. To like, you know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
I bet that was a judgment that person made. Like, hey, I can like needle this person a little bit. I don't know how many like 75-year-old, 80-year-olds are walking down the street getting like brutally harassed by anyone in downtown Olympia. It's just not like that.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, just coming from the city and there being
From O-Town.
that's right, Oakland representing. Not that I'm actually from there. I grew up in Fremont. I just want to say that. But I did live there for a decade, which, but coming from the lower class and coming from an urban environment, I am not fazed at all by people yelling at me, people mean mugging me, or certainly people standing around and asking for change, which is really what's happening. Like people are just fucking hanging out because they don't got a job. They don't have a place to hang out. They don't have maybe they don't have a home, and maybe that's just where their friends are. And it's fun to hang out. Like that's what they're doing.
Right.
They're not looking for someone to fuck with. They're just like shooting the shit. To some people, that's threatening. It's not the social norm for a lot of people's lives. And these people, there's a chance that they might be rude to you, especially if you talk to them in a patronizing or any way at all. Like there is a risk that person will be rude to you or indifferent or like enjoy making you uncomfortable. Doesn't bother me, but I should stop talking about this because I don't actually think that's even the full flavor of downtown.
Yeah, I know. It was funny because I was like, hey, what do you think about downtown? You instantly jumped to that controversy. But I mean, what do you think of downtown?
Downtown,
Olympia.
yeah. My actual impression of downtown is it's a great place to spend money. I love to spend money on there. It's like a mall-like environment to me, except where it doesn't, like there's no fake air pumped in and there's no shops filled with clothes I don't like.
Right.
Like I like the clothes there. I love Compass Rose. I like all the bookstores downtown.
Score one for downtown.
Yeah, and there's
independent movie theater.
Oh, yeah, independent movie theater is great there. I enjoy the Capitol Theater. Even just being inside of it is pleasant. It's a nice space to be.
How many? There's 3 playhouses downtown?
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And
one thing about downtown Olympia, I read a little blurb about one of those like little advertisements like come to Evergreen College, and one of the things that it touted for the main attractions about trying to attract students to the Olympia community was the vibrant downtown experience. And it was phrased like that, vibrant downtown experience. And I was like, you know what? That is 100% true.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's aesthetically distinctive from other places. Like, yeah, it's a good-looking downtown, and
When I moved here, I was involved with the Yes Yes Music Collective, but I didn't really know anybody very well yet. I mean, I'm talking this is week 1 of being in Olympia. Another thing I love about downtown Olympia is the alleyways. It has picturesque and varied alleyways.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked both sets of alleyways. So the alleyway that would be between 4th and State, and then between 5th and Legion?
I don't know.
No, between 4th and 5th.
Yeah.
And just took notice of one thing per block of the alleyways, and I developed Guire's downtown alley tour. And then when I would meet somebody who I, thought was worth hanging out, then that was like my in, like, oh, do you want to go on my, downtown alley tour? And I think maybe the first person who I took on that was Gray Francis, and we are still excellent friends to this day.
There you go. And it doesn't seem like it's planned to be the aesthetic it is. It's not like the city is like, oh, we need to make downtown look vibrant.
The town is changing. You can tell that it won't be the same for long.
Yeah,
Joe Caposcia quote. But
next to New Moon, they're making that space.
Yeah,
like
the
there.
massive apartment building going in next to New Moon. Constantly, businesses changing and people act like the sky is falling. But the truth is that almost all those same suites have been changing continuously since I moved here. Like I don't see any difference in the amount of businesses opening or closing in the decade I've lived here. It seems just that it's the same rate as ever.
Yeah, yeah.
So downtown is certainly building up. That apartment building is like 150 units or something like that. There's a lot of apartments. Yeah. So, who knows? We'll see. We'll see how it's going.
The yuppies are all gonna move in.
Yeah, yuppies are going to be there. They took away some of our valuable parking lot real estate. The way I see it is there is a parking lot there, and now there is a building that will house people who will spend their money downtown. That's just the way I see it. And I'm sure there's like a really, really good argument against it. I just don't know the argument for why that is a bad thing. Outside of the fact that them putting up that building has disrupted the business of the Newman Collective,
Yeah,
and
that's
that
true.
sucks.
Yeah.
I know that at one time they were like pile driving the supports for the building. It was literally like knocking things off of
Oh, yeah, that sucks.
the walls and everything. So
If they can get through this, I think that actually would be a net gain. Like the
Yeah.
idea of staying in this
That's
apartment
kinda-
downtown, and then there's a cafe like at your feet. Like
the
that
best
sounds,
cafe that's in downtown
Yeah,
is
I know.
right next to you. So yeah, hopefully it works in
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Do you have anything more to say about downtown? I wanted to just tell that story about the alley. This episode of Olympia Pop Rocks is brought to you by Little General Food Shop. The Little General Food Shop is a specialty food shop in downtown Olympia where you can buy small label, local, and imported delicious foods and gifts that you definitely won't find anywhere else. Did you know that Little General sells wine? There used to be no convenient location to pick up a nice bottle of vino in downtown Olympia, but now there is. The Little General Food Shop has a great selection of wines, as well as cheeses and other snacks that pair perfectly with that bottle of rosé you picked up for an afternoon picnic in the spring sunshine. The Little General Food Shop is located at 313 Fifth Avenue, right around the corner from Rainy Day Records. When you stop by for that bottle of wine, say hello to them for us and let them know that you heard about the Little General Food Shop from Olympia Pop Rocks. And now, on with our interview. All right, welcome to Olympia Pop Rocks. We are sitting here with Meg Martin.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
Meg is in a variety of different projects, and we'll see which one she wants to talk about today.
Who are you? Explain yourself. Why are you in my home?
Oh God, where do I even start? So I am someone that wears a lot of hats, as they say, but I actually kind of hate that terminology.
I'm going to interrupt you there with a little story.
Okay.
So, congratulations, by the way, on just getting into a house. That's incredible.
Thank
Big
you.
deal. And I was talking with Jem the other day, and he was like, "Well, how's that possible?" I was like, "No, Meg is a full-grown adult. She's
grown-ass adult.
Grown-ass
grown-ass
adult with
adult.
like real responsibilities, but at the same time, you're like also this crazy punk."
Yeah, it's pretty weird. I sometimes like to think of myself as a shapeshifter, and am the program director of a shelter downtown that is
homeless
called
shelter.
Homeless shelter, yeah. It's called the Interfaith Works Emergency Overnight Shelter, and the reason it's called that long, awkward name is
What's the acronym?
IWEOS. It's not even a good acronym. But the reason that we did it like that is because we had it named something else previously called the People's House, and it stirred up all kinds of wild controversy in Olympia. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah, I have some
Yeah.
stuff I want to say about that.
We were really pressured by some people when it was clear that we were going to be continuing on and opening our doors. We were really pressured politically to change the name. And so we were like, oh, well, we could totally rebrand or whatever. But then I just was like, you know what? After all this, I want a name that is so long and boring that no one will ever say it again. And so we went with Interfaith Works Emergency Overnight Shelter. And
Wow.
yeah, and so we're a shelter that serves highly vulnerable adults. We have 37 beds for men, women, and some beds for couples as well. And so essentially we opened a shelter that was trying to meet the needs of people based on what they were telling us their needs were, rather than assuming their needs for them and creating a program based on those assumptions. And so one of the things that happens a lot in shelter is that it's highly, highly gendered. So what that ends up looking like as well is that couples get separated from each other. And so that's one of the big reasons why people that are in couples don't access shelter, because there's been stories where one of the partners goes to the hospital and the other partner doesn't even know about it until the morning when they get kicked out at 7 a.m. and is not given any information about what's going on. And so it's just like a real safety and comfort factor. And so people choose to sleep outside instead. And so we're really lucky because we're flexible and we're a newer program. And so we're able to sort of navigate some of those things and make changes where we want to. So We have couples that stay together, and
Is that convention just born out of?
yeah, I guess that's a really good question. I don't know. I think that there's just so much like fear around societal norms, and I think that like homelessness really freaks everyone out, even people that are working in it, because it's like this thing that it just like rattles all of the norms that we believe that we have, and it like rattles this idea of the American dream, and it rattles these all of these like ideas that we have about like the world that we should be living in. And so then I think that people's reaction to it is like, so we must control it. It's easy to plug things into those existing societal norms, like the gender roles, or
So there's like a big focus on like the establishment of like rules to like maintain control, so like things don't get out of hand and all that.
And
So are things that completely out of hand at your shelter?
sometimes. But well, yeah, and I think also like this idea that this like underlying moral current that poverty is the fault of the person. If that's the framework that we're looking through, then they need rules to like have their life be reined in, because if only their life was reined in, and if only they knew how to balance a checkbook, and if only they knew how to be Christian or whatever it is, then their poverty would end. I think that is what it's based on, definitely.
So what was the first time that you were aware of Olympia or anything that was coming out of Olympia, whether it's like, how did you get here? What was your path?
A lot of my friends, they've like dreamed of Olympia for a long time, and they knew about Olympia growing up, and they listened to all the bands from here. And I was like a hippie in high school, and I didn't really know what was going on. And
I thought you were a jock.
well, I was also a jock. I was the hippie on the soccer team. was what it was. And so, but I actually came to Olympia because I had close to maybe 2.5 years of some pretty serious mental health stuff. I was dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety and bipolar, and I had a few, I guess you would say, like mental breakdowns. I also had been somebody that had been self-medicating my depression and anxiety for many, many years. And so it all kind of came to a head, and I ended up going into a drug rehab facility and went through a 28-day program there. They were pretty traditional in a lot of ways.
That was here in Olympia?
No, that was actually in Colorado.
Oh.
So this is like right before I got to Olympia. And that was a regular 28-day program. And then they were pretty traditional. And so if you didn't have a life that looked kind of legitimate to them, like a career or family or whatever, which I didn't have at the time. I had my dog, who was my saving grace. And
was that Future Man?
that was Future Man, yeah. And so they sent you to a sober living facility, and they played it all up like you would be this much 60% more likely to relapse if you didn't go here, and which is a whole nother thing that all of those statistics are like not based really in any kind of reality. But so I went there, and it was horrible, and I hated it, and it was a waste of money, and all of these things. And then I had a friend named Shelly who was living in Olympia, had moved out here. I didn't really know anything about it. And I had burned a lot of bridges in my life, and so I didn't have a lot of options of where to go. And she said, come out here and play music with me again. And so I did. And I cold called, moved to Olympia, and it was the best decision I ever made.
What did you think of it when you got here? Or were you just happy to be away from home?
I was really scared, actually. I was just like, what am I doing? I've had the last 2 years of like complete confusion, so much self-destruction and so much like self-loathing, and I was like this tiny, I don't know, like the thinnest piece of paper just like blowing around in the rain when I got here, I feel like. And Shelly just really took care of me. We just like shared a bed in this weird apartment on the west side, and I didn't know what to expect. I remember walking with her to the West Side Co-op for the first time, and I was like, where are we? I have never been anywhere like this before in my life. It took us a really long time to make friends also.
Yeah.
We knew about shows and stuff, and we would go, but we'd never
what was your
talked to anyone.
what was your foothold into whatever community you got into?
We had another friend. Shelly and I had lived in Missoula together at the same time, and we had another friend named Peter who had also moved from Missoula to Olympia, and he was really like way more in the scene than we were, and he was already in bands here and everything. And the first show I ever went to, though, there was this kind of legendary punk house in Olympia called Rumbletown. and they had this sort of dramatic falling out. It was a situation where a friend owned a house and then eventually wanted the house for themselves. And so all of the other friends that were living there had to leave. And they had this huge last party at Rumbletown. And that was the first show I ever went to in Olympia. And I didn't know anyone. And everyone was just like wild, like freaking out, having fun, bands playing. It was just like this wild scene. And I had no context whatsoever for understanding. But it's funny to look back at that time and see like so many of my closest community friends that were going through that thing. And I was like almost observing from a looking glass.
So then you got into music?
So when I came back here, I was playing music with Shelly again. Mm-hmm. And so we started playing shows. Our band was called Razzmatazz. We started playing shows in houses and met people.
Had you guys been doing shows in Missoula?
Yeah, we had been a band since we were teenagers, pretty much. I was 20, Shelly was 19. And we had been playing shows in Missoula that whole time.
So for full disclosure, then I ended up joining this band. I remember the first time that I saw Razzmatazz play was in Missoula, and we were there for Total Fest. And I was playing with a band called the Pasties. And I saw you play at an ice cream parlor there. Mm-hmm. And I watched the set, which was you and Shelly both on keyboards and then Jimmy on guitar. And Jimmy also lives in Olympia, so I knew him. I turned and asked somebody who knew you guys and who I knew. I was like, who is this group? Oh my gosh, they're so good. And they were like, oh, this is Razzmatazz. And I said, oh, where are they from? And they're like, oh, well, they live in Olympia. And then right there, I was like, I'm going to join that band. Nice. And then so afterwards, I don't know if it was you or Shelly.
I think it was me.
Okay, so then I came up to you and I was like, hi, and introduced myself. And I was like, I really want to join your band. I really like it. And then you were like, what would you play? And I was like, keyboards. And so there was like 3 keyboards and then and a guitar, which is a ridiculous lineup. But that's the first time I remember meeting you guys. And then that was it. I don't think we talked to each other for a few months, but then I weaseled my way into the group somehow.
Yeah, and then that was actually like an interesting time because that was the end of the summer. And then in the fall, then the Pasties were going on tour, and
that's right. And I couldn't.
Guire last minute couldn't go on the tour because you got evicted from your house, and so you had to move.
Oh God!
And so
that's right.
You couldn't go on the tour, and so then you were like, you should bring Meg to play keyboard, and then I went on Pasties tour, and then that's where I met Kevin.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's Kevin Rainsbury. For more information, refer to Olympia Pop Rock's #1 with Kevin Rainsbury.
Yeah.
All right. So then go on tour, fall in love, come back, continue doing music. Eventually, Razzmatazz kind of goes on hiatus for a while, a big extended hiatus. And then what do you do after you start getting into guitar?
Yeah, so I started playing guitar, and 2 of my close friends, we were like, let's start a band where we don't know how to play the instruments that we're playing. And so we did, and we were called Dogjaw, and I played guitar, and Kendra played bass, and Joey played drums. And it was awesome. We didn't play our first show for like 8 months, and we just practiced and learned the instruments, and I couldn't even like hold a guitar at first. And then we ended up going on to put out an LP and then a split 12-inch with another band called Agatha, and we went on a big US tour, and we went on a Europe tour with Reviver and a bunch of smaller West Coast tours. And actually at Total Fest that time where we met Guire, I had gone to college there, but I had dropped out in my last semester for the reasons I was talking about earlier. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go just to the registrar's office and see how many credits I have left to graduate. And they were like, 7. You have 7 credits left to graduate. And so I came, after that I came back to Olympia and kept playing music and whatever. And then I was like, I'm going to look into graduating. And there was this one upper division social work class that I needed to finish, and it wasn't offered at Evergreen. So I sweet talked my way into UW Tacoma to finish this one class. And then during that process, one of the teachers there encouraged me to get my master's. And so...
and what do you think when she was like, you should get your master's?
I was like, I pretty much have only exclusively failed out of school. That doesn't seem possible. I failed out of college like 3 different times. And I never got really good grades in high school or anything. And so I kind of was like, that's impossible. But I also knew my life's work had something to do with this. And so if anyone could like talk their way into something, I think I probably could. And so I tried, I went for it, and I got into the UW Tacoma master's program. And so, yeah, that was a really crazy time because I was playing in Dogjaw and also trying to finish school. And we actually left for a Europe tour the day after I finished my master's program.
And so then how did it lead to the work that you're doing now?
One of the things that's really cool about Olympia that I don't know how much you all have gotten into, but it has to do kind of with the punk scene and with the underground nature of so many things here. But there's a really amazing activist scene as well in Olympia. And one of the programs that's a part of that is called the Emma Goldman Youth Homeless Outreach Project, or Iggy Hop.
That's an acronym there.
Yeah,
There you
there's
go.
an acronym. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Yeah, so Iggy Hop is a street outreach program, and it's all completely volunteer run and non-hierarchical. And we are out on bicycles hauling trailers that are theoretically full of blankets, camping supplies, warm clothes, vitamins, hygiene supplies, all these things, and are out on the streets every single night of the year doing street outreach between 5 and 10 p.m. Iggy Hop, also part of what we do is that we're a needle exchange program, a mobile needle exchange program. And so what that is that for folks that are IV drug users or are diabetic that are living on the streets, they don't really have access to being able to safely dispose of their sharps. And so they give them to us safely, and then we give them clean supplies back. So yeah, we're out on the streets providing all of those services, but also just kind of being a friendly face and somebody there that's meeting people literally where they're at. So I had been doing that for that whole time that I've lived in Olympia, pretty much. Getting to know people on the streets and getting to know why they were on the streets and why weren't they accessing shelter, and just kind of getting to know their stories. And so by forming those relationships, when it came time in my master's program to think about my capstone project, which is essentially like your thesis, I had already known for years that we needed to have a day center and an accessible night shelter in Olympia because we didn't have one. I created that program as my capstone project. Kind of simultaneously, the city of Olympia was passing all of these ordinances that were further criminalizing homelessness, sidewalk ordinances, banning the use of public space, camping.
yeah, that was one
public
where it's
space.
like, it's illegal to sit on the sidewalk within certain distance. I mean, it was essentially the whole sidewalk and a variety of different ordinances downtown.
Yeah, and you're
And
not allowed
selective enforcement.
selective enforcement and panhandling ordinances where you're not allowed to panhandle within 25 feet of an ATM or a parking meter because people, this fear of like getting mugged or whatever, and just all of these things that further criminalize homelessness. And so I started going to City Hall to speak out with two other folks that were also long-term street outreach workers with Iggy Hop, Jeff and Cassie, and just saying to the city, you're passing all of these laws, but people aren't going to go away. So we have to figure out how to help them have their basic needs met, or else your jails are just going to be full and hospitals are going to be full. And so essentially it got to this point, this critical point where we knew that no one was going to do it unless we did it. And so I had already done that work, all the research and all of that in my master's program. And so a local nonprofit called Interfaith Works decided to umbrella our project because the city was essentially like, who are you?
Right.
You're just some like weirdos with different colored hair.
Right, but like a Christian organization, like doing an outreach program to the poor, like makes plenty of sense. Like that's a model that people understand.
Yeah, and I will say that they are not a Christian organization, just for the record, but that they're they actually are one of the most diverse interfaith agencies that I've seen, which is really cool, including Muslim and Baha'i and Buddhist communities and all kinds of folks. But in other places, Interfaith Works is really code for like Presbyterian and Lutheran
and Lutheran and Catholic.
And Christian. So it's one of the cool things about Interfaith Works in Olympia.
It's cool.
And so they decided to umbrella our project and have essentially given us just kind of the freedom to run it the way that we know we need to run it.
So why is Olympia governing bodies such shitheads about this project?
We had one hell of a time finding a building, that's for sure. And we haven't even found our
This is the way I
building yet.
remember your original search when it was the project. The People's House was looking for a place to like host the program. So this is pre-Interfaith Works. And this is from an outside perspective on it. It was here's a building that'll work. And then the community freaking out and being like, you can't put house exclusive sex offenders 2 blocks from my house. And then there's a school there, sex offenders. And then like, how about this place? And I'm like, sex offenders, did you forget the sex offenders? There's a school within 3 miles of this. You're like, how about over here? And they're like, sex offenders, there's a school 10 miles from there.
Yeah, that's cool.
That might be hyperbole, but editorial after editorial in the Olympian
Yeah.
with essentially that sentiment.
And I think that the reason that that happened was because I was like, you know, we were talking out at City Hall and just being like, well, you need to just create a shelter that's for everyone, you know? And it seems like in my mind, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer. If you're doing this work, you are trying to accommodate people's needs as best as possible, right? Like, duh. Not right. And this kind of goes back to that idea of this like moral, this very strong moral undercurrent that people's situations are their fault. And so we were talking about this model of shelter that we've opened. It's called low barrier, and nobody knew what that meant really. And so people just lost it and were like, what does this mean? And there's not going to be any rules, and there's no regulations, and there's no, anyone could just walk in the door. And so we were looking at this building that was close to a Catholic church that had a K through 12 school, and also, ironically, opens up their doors every winter from November through February for a 12-bed men's shelter for the last 25 years. They were saying, you know, you can't open your shelter next to our school because you're going to be housing sex offenders, drug addicts, and felons. That was their message. Sex offenders, drug addicts, and felons over and over again. Sex offenders, drug addicts, and felons.
I know, that's all I was hearing.
And they were like, and so close to the church. But really, our model was essentially the exact same model that was being used inside the church every year for the last 25 years, but nobody knew about it.
The thing that always blew me away about that is that the distance from that proposed shelter site to that Catholic church was essentially equal distant to downtown. And it's just like, I never understood that. Like Olympia, you can walk one side to the other side in approximately 40 minutes. So like anywhere in Olympia is pretty damn near a school,
yeah.
like even downtown where anyone can go. So
well, yeah. And I mean, it
never
quickly
understood that.
became clear that like the use of like logic and like rhetoric around research and all of these things was pretty much useless because people just felt really scared, you know? And so we had at that point completely lost control of the message. I mean, because there's just so many, like you can look at a map and see all of the registered sex offenders that live in the same neighborhood as the school that they were talking about. Like they're already there, like people are already there, but like that rhetoric didn't work at that point.
Right, you couldn't match like the community sense of fear with facts to the contrary. You had to like go a different route.
Yeah, and it was really sad for me because I felt like we had this opportunity to talk about sexual violence on a really public level. I mean, we had inside that church, St. Michael's Church, we had a public forum that over 300 people attended. We had this like really public opportunity to talk about sexual violence and prevention of sexual violence, and we were completely missing the point and completely missing our chance because all of the talk was around this idea of stranger danger when really 97% of sexual assaults that happen to children happen from a family member. It was like this really sad missed opportunity in our community. And that's been the thing that's the hardest for me is that, you know, I'm surrounded all day long with people that are in crisis and have experienced like such unfathomable traumas and have made it through and survived these incredible feats. And what has been the hardest for me in this whole process is watching our community be so full of stigma and fear for the other. Yet we have this narrative that we're like a progressive liberal town, and that's been really disheartening.
Right, you said that they survived, but the truth is that they're surviving it still. That's part of the thing about people who are living on the street and struggling with the lack of stability in their life from whatever cause, is that it's something that's happening to them like today. It's not like they got to this point and now they're like, oh no, I'm suffered and now I'm just on the street. It's like what's happening to them now is affecting where they are. So you offering this space allows them to get out of the situation is going to lead to maybe better results, or at least them not dying in the cold.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another common narrative that happened at that time and now is that offering services for the homeless will make Olympia like a homeless mecca. Like people will just be like, oh, you want the easy life? Show on up to Olympia. You know,
Yeah, that's actually called the magnet theory, and it's something that has been debunked time and time again, and people just really feel and believe that it's true, and so then they talk about it as if it's true. And so I was trying to get creative one day about how to like talk to people about it and kind of get under that feelings are facts kind of thing that was happening. And so I just was like, pick a city name, any city name, and I was with a friend, and they were like, okay, Toledo, Ohio. And then I was like, Google Toledo, Ohio, magnet for the homeless. We seriously went through like 25 cities, middle of the country, East Coast, West Coast, North, South, Southeast, everywhere. And there was, without fail, an editorial, a letter to the editor, a newspaper article, some kind of news video, something that was like people in those cities all feeling as if their city was a magnet for the homeless based on a new service getting opened up. Or, you know, you can go to San Francisco and they're paying for bus tickets to Denver, they're paying for bus tickets to Olympia or whatever. And it's this thing that is kind of funny because there's just literally not enough homeless people to go around. And this very like interesting psychological phenomenon that happens that people just really believe that that's true, and it isn't.
Have you seen success at your shelter?
Yeah, definitely. Every day. We've got a really wide definition of success, and one person that's gotten completely sober just on their own. We've had 14 of our people that have been with us moved into housing since we've opened, and we've been open since November 1st of 2014.
And the shelter also provides a place to access other services, right? I mean, it's that.
We do
that's
the
part
best
of
that
it.
we can, yeah. We are only, part of our agreement with the church basement that we're in is that we can only provide services in the nighttime. So we're only open from 5 p.m. to 7
But I
a.m.
mean, as far as like housing, right? You're a social worker by trade. You have a knowledge base and a resource base to
Absolutely.
help bridge those gaps.
Absolutely. And part of our model that we've created is that we bring in services to people rather than expecting people to go places for services all the time because they fall through the cracks. That's how that happens. And so we have coordinated with the local mental health agency. There's an agency here that does chemical dependency treatment bed placements, housing, and we bring all those folks in to the shelter as much as we can to get those services for people. And so there's some of our folks that haven't accessed any services period except for Iggy Hop when we were seeing them on the streets for decades. And they're now in the shelter every night. Some of them have gotten signed up for healthcare, gotten connected with mental health services. Like those are all actually like gigantic successes.
Do you think Olympia is different from other towns?
Yes, I do.
Do tell. How so?
I also think though that part of it is that we like to think that we're different from other towns.
Well, yeah,
so I will say that.
Yeah, from earlier statements, I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I think that we think that we're different. But I do think that we actually are. You know, when I came here, I felt like I had never been to a place like this before, even though I had lived in small art communities and whatever. But it's funny now thinking about it, I don't know exactly how to talk about how it's different.
Mm-hmm.
So if people listening to this podcast wanted to some way support your organization or just to help in some way, what could they do?
If you're in Olympia, we're always in need of volunteers, and we've got a website. It's iwshelter.org, and you can go there and there's a volunteer tab and you can learn more about that. But we are always in need of certain in-kind donations like blankets and socks and warm clothes, hygiene supplies.
And if they had those things, where could they bring them?
They could bring them to the First Christian Church, which is where we're located, 701 Franklin Street, Southeast. And our door is in the parking lot under the stairs. Accept donations between 4 and 6 p.m. on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We are also always in need of monetary support to be able to keep our program going. We depend pretty heavily on county funding, and that funding is always getting cut at the state level. And so there's really easy ways to see on our website how much certain things cost us, like how much it costs to house somebody for a month, for a year. And so folks can go there and donate as well just by clicking.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to Olympia Pop Rocks, your favorite podcast. We'd like to thank Meg for coming on. You can find out more about her and about us at our website, www.olympiapoprocks.com. If you listen to us and like us, by all means, please like us where you like things, share us where you share things, and rate us on iTunes. It makes us look so good. It helps. But enough of that. Thank you again for listening to Olympia Pop Rocks. You can see more of us at our website, www.olympiapoprocks.com, and we'll be back again with a new episode in 2 weeks. Thanks again.